Look closely at the edge of Riverview Road in the Cuyahoga Valley of Ohio. Rising silently out of the dirt, sitting perfectly flush against the modern asphalt, is a colossal monolithic stone wall. There is no second wall. The historical plaque might point to a manicured bicycle trail, calling it a towpath, but the heavy-duty industrial staging area required to service a lock of this magnitude has been completely erased. It is simply an orphaned industrial relic, a heavy masonry ghost completely swallowed by the modern landscape. Mainstream history, if pressed, will casually tell you this is just a forgotten romantic ruin of the Ohio and Erie Canal, a charming remnant of pioneer spirit. But at the TitanMetrics audit desk, we do not romanticize ruins. We do not accept the poetic folklore of the 19th century. We run the numbers. When subjected to a rigorous forensic engineering audit, this wall is not a monument to unmechanized human perseverance. It is a mathematical and physical impossibility. It is a crime scene of erased infrastructure. Welcome to the audit. Let us open the ledger on the Ohio Anomaly. To understand the sheer scale of the deception, we must first isolate the physical evidence in the field. Let us establish the geographical and material parameters of the Riverview Anomaly. TitanMetrics field agents Rispatha and AndyRack1 secured the location coordinates. Nestled in a dense, heavily eroded topography next to the Cuyahoga River, we find the remnants of a megalithic lock complex. Examine the structure. We are looking at tiered layers of Ohio sandstone, specifically the dense Berea sandstone formation. Notice the sheer tonnage of these individual blocks. Notice the razor-thin precision fitting, executed with such tight tolerances that it has survived over a century of flooding, freeze-thaw cycles, and heavy vegetative erosion. Modern historical consensus expects us to believe that this level of industrial uniformity was achieved in a primitive, mosquito-infested wilderness using hand chisels, wooden derricks, and horse-drawn carts. In modern civil engineering, to quarry, transport, and precision-set sandstone blocks of this magnitude requires diesel-powered excavators, hydraulic cranes, and laser-guided masonry alignment. Yet the official ledger claims this was accomplished in the 1820s by untrained transient laborers. But this wall is merely a single node in a massive continental network. To expose the fraud, we must zoom out. We must audit the entire 308-mile corridor. The official timeline states that construction begun on July 4, 1825, and the primary canal was completed in 1832. 7 years, that is the allocated temporal window. The narrative dictates that men in the wilderness, using nothing but iron-tipped picks, wooden shovels, wheelbarrows, and black powder, carved a trench 308 miles long, stretching from Lake Erie in the north to the Ohio River in the south. We have already exposed the mathematical fiction of the original Erie Canal in New York. The Ohio project suffers from the exact same logistical deficit. To prove this, we will remove opinion from the equation and apply basic volumetric geometry. The engineering specifications for a standard 19th century Ohio canal dictate a trapezoidal prism. The trench was mandated to be 40 feet wide at the top waterline, 26 feet wide at the flat bottom, and 4 feet deep. Let us calculate the cross-sectional area, 40 plus 26, divided by 2, multiplied by 4. That yields exactly 132 square feet of cross-sectional earth. Now we multiply that by the length. 308 miles equals 1,626,240 linear feet. The total volume of geometrically perfect excavated material is 214,663,680 cubic feet. Converted to standard earth-moving metrics, that is 7,950,000 cubic yards of dense earth, shale, clay, and bedrock. Mainstream historians will point to these numbers and blindly applaud the work ethic of the pioneers, but they fail to apply the fundamental laws of soil mechanics. When you excavate compacted earth, it immediately loses its geological density and incorporates air. This is called the swell factor. A cubic yard of hard-packed Ohio clay and shale swells by approximately 25 to 30% once it is dug up. Therefore, that nearly 8 million cubic yards of in-ground material instantly expands into over 10 million cubic yards of loose, unmanageable spoil. 10 million cubic yards of debris that must be manually shoveled, loaded into wheelbarrows, and transported out of the trench. Let us apply the temporal constraint to this expanded volume. 7 years is 2,555 days. However, the state of Ohio is subject to severe winter freezing. From late November through March, the ground is frozen solid, rendering unmechanized manual excavation physically impossible. Furthermore, spring thaws turn the Cuyahoga Valley into an impassable liquid mud basin. Conservatively, factoring out deep freezes, catastrophic weather, and the recorded cholera outbreaks, they possessed a maximum of 1,600 workable days. Divide 10 million cubic yards of loose spoil by 1,600 days. That requires the manual excavation, loading, and hauling of 6,250 cubic yards of heavy material every single day, without a single mechanical failure. Let us visualize that daily kinetic requirement. A standard 19th century wooden wheelbarrow holds approximately 1/10 of a cubic yard. That equates to 62,500 fully loaded wheelbarrow trips executed perfectly through deep mud and virgin forest every single workable day for 7 years. Critics will argue they used black powder to blast the denser rock. This is a deliberate mechanical misdirection. Black powder fractures bedrock, it does not excavate it. It does not haul away the shattered debris, and it certainly does not perfectly grade clay banks to a mathematically precise waterproof angle of repose. The sheer kinetic energy required to move 10 million cubic yards of spoil by human muscle alone vastly exceeds the biological output of the recorded workforce. The timeline is an absolute fabrication.
The earthworks alone destroy the timeline. But a trench is completely useless without the heavy hydraulic infrastructure to manage the water. Let us audit the masonry. Along the Ohio route, to navigate the drastic changes in topographical elevation, they supposedly hand-built 146 massive stone locks. These are not simple decorative stone walls. A canal lock is a heavy-duty hydraulic machine designed to withstand immense, sustained hydrostatic pressure. Water is exceptionally heavy. It weighs roughly 62.4 pounds per cubic foot. When a lock chamber fills with 8 to 10 feet of water, the outward lateral pressure exerted on the stone walls is cataclysmic. To prevent the walls from buckling and blowing out, They had to be constructed of monolithic, perfectly dressed blocks of stone, ranging from 6 to 12 feet thick at the base. Let us calculate the mass. The specific gravity of Berea sandstone is approximately 2.2. A single cubic foot weighs roughly 140 pounds. Based on the structural dimensions of the Ohio locks, the single lift lock of this scale requires conservatively between 2,500 and 3,000 tons of perfectly dressed waterproofed ashlar masonry. Multiply an average of 2,700 tons by 146 locks. We are looking at nearly 400,000 tons of precision-cut sandstone. Where did this stone come from? The official record points to isolated primitive local quarries. We are expected to believe that unmechanized laborers carved 400,000 tons of stone from the earth using hand drills, iron wedges, and sledgehammers. But extracting the stone is merely the beginning. The physical transportation of 400,000 tons of rock across a roadless, swampy wilderness is a mechanical paradox. A standard draft horse traversing a graded, dry dirt road can pull perhaps 1.5 tons on a wheeled wagon. In the deep mud, steep ravines, and primeval forest of 1820s Ohio, that pulling capacity drops by 70%. Moving a single 3-ton foundation block from the quarry to the lock site would require synchronized teams of oxen, highly reinforced heavy-duty wagons, and a pre-existing logistical road network that simply did not exist. You do not drag 400,000 tons of precision-cut megalithic stone through a swamp without a pre-existing heavy rail network or combustion engines. The transportation logistics are a mathematical fiction.
We must now address the chemistry of the construction. You cannot dry stack a hydraulic lock. The stone must be bound and sealed. Standard lime mortar of the early 19th century dissolves in water. It is useless for canal construction. The locks required hydraulic cement, a highly specialized mortar that cures and hardens while fully submerged underwater. Mainstream historians will claim they simply used Canvas White's patent from the New York project. But possessing a recipe is not the same as possessing an industrial supply chain. Let us audit the chemical thermodynamics of that claim. Hydraulic cement is not simply dug out of the ground. It requires an intense industrial-grade chemical transformation. The raw limestone must be pulverized, then placed into massive kilns and burned at exactly 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit. This extreme sustained heat drives off the carbon dioxide, chemically altering the rock. To produce the thousands of tons of hydraulic cement required for 146 locks, you require massive industrial kilns operating at peak thermal capacity, 24 hours a day for years. Where did these kilns come from in the virgin forest? More importantly, where did the fuel come from? To sustain 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit, you require hundreds of thousands of tons of perfectly dried timber or metallurgical coal. You cannot execute precise industrial chemical engineering in a muddy trench without a pre-existing, highly developed heavy industry footprint. The chemical supply chain is missing from the historical ledger. When confronted with these unyielding volumetric, mass tonnage, and chemical deficits, mainstream historians always deploy the same defense mechanism. They invoke the sheer volume of human capital. They claim an army of Irish and German immigrants performed this miracle through raw, unyielding brute force. Let us audit the biology of this hypothetical army. Let us audit the thermodynamics of the human engine. Digging dense clay, fracturing shale, and hauling loaded wheelbarrows for 12 to 14 hours a day requires an immense, sustained metabolic output. A laborer performing continuous, heavy earth moving expends roughly 5,000 calories per day. To maintain the required daily excavation rate of 6,000 cubic yards, you would need a sustained, perfectly healthy, perfectly synchronized workforce of at least 5,000 to 7,000 men working simultaneously across the entire 300-mile route. How do you supply 35 million calories of high-protein, unspoilable food to a sprawling, decentralized workforce in an unmapped wilderness every single day? There were no mechanized agricultural supply chains. There was no refrigeration. The logistical footprint required just to feed, house, and supply this army would require a secondary infrastructure project almost as large as the canal itself. Now, we must audit the draft animals, thousands of horses and mules, utilized to haul the stone and pull the timber. A working draft horse is a strict biological furnace. It requires a minimum of 30 pounds of dense feed and forage every single day just to survive heavy labor. If you deploy 2,000 draft animals, you must import 60,000 pounds of feed into the swamp every single day. Here we encounter the unforgiving tyranny of the wagon equation. To pull 60,000 pounds of feed through thick mud over long distances, the horses pulling the supply wagons must consume a significant portion of the very feed they are transporting. In a pre-industrial wilderness, long-distance bulk logistics by horse and cart quickly reach a mathematical point of absolute failure. The biological engines consume their own payload before reaching the destination. The human and equine capital narrative is a mathematical illusion. It is a fabricated alibi designed to mask the deployment of undocumented heavy industrial mechanization. This is Phase 2 technology, operating entirely off the box, utilizing tools, logistics, and power generation that have been deliberately scrubbed from the historical record.
We have established that the construction narrative is structurally, physically, and thermodynamically fraudulent. But the true crime of the Ohio and Erie Canal is not the construction. It is the systemic destruction. Return to the anomaly. Why is the Riverview Wall an orphan? Where is the rest of this massive, continent-spanning heavy masonry complex? The official ledger claims the canals simply became obsolete. It states they fell out of use due to the emerging dominance of the railroads in the 1850s. Finally, historians point to the catastrophic Great Dayton Flood of 1913, claiming it washed away the banks, acting as the final nail in the coffin. They tell us the infrastructure was naturally abandoned, left to decay, and peacefully reclaimed by nature. That is a corporate lie. They did not abandon it. They executed it. We must follow the capital. The financial cartels, the robber barons who monopolized the new railroad empires, viewed the free existing waterways as an existential threat to their freight monopolies. Railroad syndicates systematically purchased the canal right-of-ways, the land deeds, and the infrastructure, not to use them, but to legally quarantine and dismantle them. But neutralizing the financial competition was only the secondary objective. The primary objective of the ruling monopolies was the permanent concealment of the canal's true, highly mechanized origins. You cannot leave a 300-mile heavy industrial complex lying around in plain sight. If the monolithic masonry, the sheer scale of the locks, and the laser-like precision of the cuts were left exposed, future generations of engineers would eventually reverse engineer the mathematics. They would realize, just as TitanMetrics has, that the primitive hand tools of the era did not match the perfection of the infrastructure. So they compartmentalized and buried it. In the urban centers like Cleveland and Akron, they literally paved over it, turning the massive stone locks into subterranean sewers or foundations for rail lines. In the rural sectors like Riverview, they utilized the Conservancy Act to legally quarantine the infrastructure. They let the deep bedrock locks sit as orphaned anomalies, while modern state routes were built directly through the staging areas. They laid steel railroad tracks directly on top of the old stone towpaths. They turned continent-spanning engineering anomalies into the hidden, silent foundations of modern American transit.
This brings us back to the coordinates secured by our field agents. This single orphaned wall on Riverview Road is the bone sticking out of the dirt. It is a mathematical and physical glitch in the official timeline, a piece of megalithic evidence that was either too heavy or too structurally integrated into the deep bedrock for the monopolies to fully demolish during the Great Erasure. The Ohio and Erie Canal was not a miracle of pioneer perseverance. It was a highly classified, heavily mechanized industrial deployment. The robber barons did not build this country with wooden shovels and wheelbarrows. They built it with undocumented, heavy machinery. They executed a massive infrastructural takeover, capitalized on it, and when the time came to transition to a railroad monopoly, they buried the evidence to protect their technological supremacy. There are thousands of these anomalies scattered across the continent, hidden beneath the asphalt, buried in the dense tree lines, silently defying the physics of their supposed creation. And thanks to the decentralized network of TitanMetrics field agents, we are going to audit every single one of them. Next time you drive down a modern highway and see a massive, out-of-place stone structure that does not fit the landscape, do not ignore it. Pull over, secure the coordinates, take a high-resolution photograph, send it to the audit desk. Because the history books are lying, the physics do not balance, and the physical evidence of a suppressed industrial timeline is everywhere, waiting to be quantified. Hit subscribe to maintain your clearance. Leave your local architectural anomalies in the comments below for future deployment. And if you have not seen our full forensic audit of the original Erie Canal, the file is on your screen right now. Trust the numbers, not the narrative. The ledger remains open.